God sees who hurts you. Long before you ever recognized the wound, long before you ever understood the betrayal, long before you ever put a name to the disappointment, you were already seeing not just your face, not just your posture, but the depth of your spirit, the heaviness in your chest, the questions in your heart. God saw every detail. Nothing done in the dark escaped his light, and nothing done against you escaped his attention. There are moments in life when you wonder if anyone notices what you're carrying. When you smile in public but break in private. When you continue to show up for others while no one shows up for you. When the hurt cuts so deeply that you convince yourself you must be invisible. But God says, I saw it. He saw the moment the words wounded you. He saw the moment the trust you gave was mishandled. He saw the moment someone took advantage of your kindness, your loyalty, your vulnerability. And while you may feel forgotten by people, heaven has taken record of every tear you refuse to cry out loud. God sees who hurts you, but he also sees who you are becoming because of it. He doesn't just watch the pain, he watches the strength being formed in the fire. He watches the resilience rising out of the ashes. He watches the maturity developing from the very thing that tried to destroy you. He sees the way your heart has stretched, the way your faith has been tested, the way your courage has been sharpened. Hurt may have entered your life uninvited, but honor is being built in you through every step of survival. There are people who walked away from you with no explanation. People who lied on you without remorse. People who benefited from you without gratitude. People who played with your heart without conviction. And you wondered if God saw. You wondered if he heard the conversation spoken behind your back. You wondered if he recognized the betrayal hidden behind the smile. Yes, he saw it. He saw what you didn't hear. He saw what you didn't know. He saw what you didn't understand at the time. And he is a God of justice, not just awareness. He doesn't simply observe, he responds. But his response is not always immediate, because he is not just protecting you. He is preparing you. You are not being overlooked. You are being positioned. You are not losing. You are learning. You are not forgotten. You are being fortified. Sometimes God allows you to see who people really are, so you don't take them into the next season he has designed for you. Sometimes the hurt is not punishment, it's protection. Sometimes the rejection is not an attack, it's a redirection. Sometimes what felt like betrayal is actually God clearing the path for your becoming. God sees who hurts you, and he also sees how you rise. He sees how you continue to love even when love wasn't returned. He sees how you continue to give even when others only took. He sees how you kept your character clean when their actions were dirty. He sees how you stayed faithful when everything around you tried to break your spirit. And because he sees, he will restore. Because he sees, he will elevate. Because he sees, he will vindicate in ways you couldn't imagine and at a time you couldn't have planned. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to explain every wound. You don't have to defend your truth to people committed to misunderstanding you. God sees, God knows, God remembers, and when the time is right, God will show you that every hurt had a purpose, every tear had a reason, and every step of pain was shaping you for a level of glory you were always meant to carry. Before you ever found the courage to tell someone what happened, before you tried to explain the heaviness that sat on your chest, before a single tear made its way down your face, God already saw the hurt. He saw the moment the disappointment cut you. He saw the second that rejection took the wind out of you. He saw when betrayal snuck up behind you and struck you where you were most vulnerable. Long before you could articulate your pain, heaven had already recorded it. Not one moment of your suffering was invisible to God. And that matters, because pain has a way of making you feel unseen. It convinces you that nobody notices, nobody cares, and nobody understands what you're carrying. You start to believe that you're isolated in your wound, that your tears are falling into a void, and that your heartache is just another story no one will ever take the time to read. But you serve a God who watched the whole thing unfold. He didn't miss the disrespect. He didn't overlook the manipulation. He didn't ignore the injustice. Even when you stayed silent to keep the peace, he saw the war raging inside your spirit. Sometimes people ask, if God saw it, why didn't he stop it? But what you don't realize is that God didn't just see what hurt you. He also sees what's ahead of you. He sees how he will use what tried to break you to build a strength inside you that nothing else could produce. He sees the maturity forming, the clarity sharpening, the discernment deepening. He sees the way you will rise from the very thing that tried to bury you. Pain may speak loudly, but purpose speaks last. You may not have spoken the pain, but God heard the language of your heart. He read the words you were too afraid to say out loud. He understood the emotions you couldn't organize. He interpreted the groans, the sighs, the nights, the numb days. Long before you prayed about it, he knew every detail. Long before you confessed the hurt, he had already begun designing your healing. The beauty of God is that he doesn't wait for you to articulate your suffering before he begins to respond to it. There are wounds too deep for language. There are hurts your vocabulary can't reach. You try to explain it to someone and the words fall apart. You try to describe the weight, but it feels heavier in the telling. And so you stay quiet, thinking silence protects you. But even your silence is a prayer that heaven can interpret. Even your quiet moments are loud to God. You didn't have to say a word for God to know how deeply it cut you. You didn't need to raise your voice for him to recognize the injustice. You didn't need to protest for him to understand the betrayal. He saw the moment it happened, and he also saw the strength you didn't know would rise out of it. When people mishandled you, God took note. When they underestimated you, God remembered. When they wounded you, God positioned himself as your healer long before you knew you would need healing. And though you might feel broken in ways you can't express, you're not hidden. You're not forgotten. You're not overlooked. God saw it all. And he is already working in the spaces you can't yet see. Already restoring what you haven't had the words to describe. Already preparing a future that will speak louder than the pain ever could. Your inner dialogue is the quiet architect of your destiny. Long before your feet ever move, your mind has already taken the first step. Long before your decisions appear on the outside, your thoughts have been shaping them on the inside. You go where your mind goes. You rise or you fall by the words you repeat to yourself when no one is around to contradict the lie or confirm the truth. That inner voice is powerful, and many people lose battles in life not because of what others said about them, but because of what they kept saying to themselves. It's not always the loud attacks from the outside that derail a person. It's the whispers of doubt on the inside. You can survive a critic across the room, but you cannot easily survive the critic living in your own head. When the inner dialogue becomes infected with fear, shame, insecurity, or old wounds, it becomes a steering wheel pulling your life toward places you never intended to go. You may desire growth, but if your thoughts insist you are unworthy, you will sabotage your own progress. You may want healing, but if your inner narrative is rehearsing the trauma more than the truth, you will walk in circles around the same emotional mountains. Many people pray for change without changing the conversation happening within themselves. They want new outcomes, but speak with the language of the past. They desire breakthroughs, but think with the limitations that broke them. But the truth is this: you cannot walk into freedom while thinking like a prisoner. You cannot step into purpose while holding conversations with your pain. Your thoughts must align with your direction, or you will always feel torn, pulled between where you want to go and where your inner voice keeps dragging you back. The enemy understands this better than most believers. He knows he doesn't have to destroy your opportunities if he can distort your inner dialogue. If he can convince you that you're not enough, that you'll never heal, that you're too broken, too late, too flawed, then he can sit back and watch you defeat yourself. All he has to do is plant the thought, and you will water it with your repetition. You will rehearse the lie until it becomes your reality. That's why your inner dialogue is not just a mental habit, it's a spiritual battleground. But the good news is that you can redirect your life by redirecting your thoughts. You can train your inner voice to speak in agreement with purpose instead of pain. You can discipline your mind to align with what God says about you rather than what life has said to you. It begins with awareness, recognizing the thoughts that are shaping your direction. It continues with intentionality, choosing new words, new truths, new agreements for your soul. And it grows with repetition, speaking life until life becomes the loudest voice within you. When your inner dialogue shifts, everything shifts. Your confidence rises because you're no longer fueling insecurity. Your courage awakens because you're no longer rehearsing fear. Your perspective changes because you're no longer magnifying what hurt you but what shaped you. You start seeing possibility where you once saw obstacles. You start recognizing opportunities that were invisible when your mind was cluttered with self-doubt. And slowly but surely, your feet begin moving in the direction your thoughts have paved. Your life will always follow the path carved by your inner words. If you internalize defeat, you will walk in defeat. If you meditate on healing, you will step toward wholeness. If you speak truth to yourself, you will find power rising inside you that no circumstance can silence. Your direction is not determined by what others say about you. It is determined by what you continually say within yourself. What they did to you was real. The disappointment was real. The betrayal was real. The abandonment, the rejection, the harsh words spoken behind your back, the broken trust you leaned on, the promises they didn't keep, none of it was imagined. You lived through it. You felt it in your bones. You carried the weight of it through days when you smiled on the outside, but were silently unraveling on the inside. Pain doesn't lose its power just because time passes. Wounds don't close just because you tell yourself to get over them. What happened was real, and you do not have to pretend it wasn't. Just because something is real doesn't mean it gets to be final. It may be part of your story, but it is not the conclusion of it. People often confuse the reality of the moment with the permanence of the moment. They assume that because they were wounded, they are now defined by that wound. They assume that because someone walked away, their future is now limited. They assume that because someone mishandled their heart, they will never trust again. But God does not allow the actions of others to become the final chapter of your life. He acknowledges the wound without giving it the authority to dictate who you become. Pain has a way of convincing you that what happened is all there will ever be. It tries to freeze you in the moment of trauma and whisper, "This is it. This is your story now." But you must remember that people can wound you, yet they cannot write your ending. What they did may have delayed you, but it cannot deny you. It may have shaken you, but it cannot stop you. Their actions may have affected your past, but they do not get to control your future. The hurt was real, but the hurt is not the author of your destiny. There is a difference between what was done to you and what God will do through you. People might have set events in motion, but God sets purpose in motion. They might have introduced the pain, but God introduces the healing. They might have closed one door, but God is the one who opens doors no one can shut. When you understand that, you stop giving people power they never earned. You stop letting their actions shape your identity. You stop allowing their choices to limit your choices. You stop allowing their brokenness to become your blueprint. Your healing is not determined by the people who hurt you. It is determined by the God who holds you. And the same God who saw the pain is the God who already has a plan for restoration. Just because the wound was deep doesn't mean the healing won't be greater. Just because the betrayal was shocking doesn't mean the blessing won't exceed your expectations. In fact, some of the greatest transformations happen after the greatest wounds. What was meant to break you becomes the very thing that reshapes you into someone stronger, wiser, more discerning, and more anchored than before. You don't have to deny what happened, but you also don't have to surrender your life to it. You don't have to keep reliving the moment in your mind. You don't have to carry the blame that was never yours to carry. You don't have to let their actions echo throughout your soul. There is a future that exists beyond the memory of what they did. There is strength that will rise beyond the sting of the hurt. There is purpose waiting beyond the pain that once felt unbearable. What they did was real, but it is not the end of your story, not the definition of your identity, and not the ceiling of your destiny. Healing doesn't begin with time or distance or distraction. It doesn't begin because you tried to stay busy or pretended the wound was small. Healing begins at the moment honesty walks into the heart and you stop running from what hurt you. You can't fix what you refuse to face. You can't mend what you keep minimizing, and you can't heal what you keep hiding from yourself. Honesty is not about exposing your wound to the world. It's about finally telling the truth to your own soul. It's the moment you stop saying, "I'm fine," when your heart knows it's still bleeding inside. There's something liberating about truth, even when the truth hurts. When you admit you're broken, you make room for repair. When you admit you're tired, you make room for rest. When you admit you're wounded, you make room for restoration. The heart cannot heal while it's wearing disguises. The soul cannot be restored while it's pretending not to limp. Some people stay stuck for years, not because healing is impossible, but because they're committed to acting like they're okay. They've built walls so high that their own emotions have no path out. They numb themselves to avoid the sting, forgetting that numbness is not healing. Numbness is a slow form of suffocation. Honesty requires courage. It means looking in the mirror without filters, without excuses, without the rehearsed answers you give people so they won't ask further questions. It means acknowledging the fears you've never named aloud, the disappointments you've neatly tucked away, the anger you swallowed to keep the peace, the sadness you hid so no one would think you were weak. Honesty takes bravery because it disrupts the narratives you've used to survive. But survival and healing are not the same. Survival keeps you functioning. Healing brings you back to life. Some people are afraid to tell the truth, how deeply something hurt them, because they think admitting the pain makes them look fragile. But honesty is not fragility. Honesty is strength. It takes power to say, that hurt me. It takes strength to say, I'm not over it yet. It takes maturity to say, I need help. Pretending may make you look strong to others, but it weakens you on the inside. Honesty strengthens you because it aligns you with reality. And you can only be healed in the reality you acknowledge, not in the illusion you present. When honesty enters the heart, clarity follows. You begin to understand why certain memories still feel heavy. You begin to see why certain patterns keep repeating themselves. You begin to recognize the places where you need boundaries, the places where you need forgiveness, the places where you need to let go, and the places where you need to rebuild. Truth acts like a light shining into corners you haven't visited in years. It reveals what needs to be addressed, what needs to be released, and what needs to be restored. And as honesty settles into the heart, the healing process begins to shift from something you endure to something you participate in. You stop waiting for time to magically fix you. You stop expecting people to apologize in order for you to be free. You stop believing that pretending you're okay will one day make you actually okay. Instead, you start tending to yourself with compassion. You start grieving the things you never allowed yourself to grieve. You start giving your heart permission to breathe after years of holding everything in. Honesty opens the door to healing because it invites you to deal with the truth. And the truth, once faced, loses its power to imprison you. Reclaiming your voice is not about volume. It is about ownership. It is the realization that somewhere along the way, life tried to silence you. Pain tried to quiet you. Fear tried to mute you. The opinions of others tried to shrink your confidence. Circumstances tried to convince you that your voice didn't matter, your thoughts didn't carry weight, and your presence was optional. But deep down, beneath all the layers of hesitation and all the echoes of past wounds, your voice is still there. Maybe faint, it may be trembling, but it is still alive, waiting for you to call it back to the surface. You were not created to be silent about your truth, your value, or your purpose. When your voice is stolen, your identity becomes distorted. When your voice is muted, your power becomes buried. When your voice is suppressed, your destiny becomes delayed. Many people lose themselves, not because they don't know who they are, but because they stop speaking from the place where their true self once lived. They were talked over, talked down to, dismissed, ignored, or controlled until they subconsciously surrendered their voice. They started saying what others wanted to hear instead of what their soul needed to express. Reclaiming your voice begins by recognizing where you lost it. Maybe you silenced yourself to keep the peace. Maybe you stayed quiet because speaking up once led to backlash. Maybe someone made you feel small, and instead of fighting back, you internalized their criticism and made it your truth. Maybe you were told you were too emotional, too loud, too opinionated, too sensitive, too difficult. Sometimes people attack your voice because they fear your power. Sometimes they minimize you because your presence threatens their comfort. But whatever the reason, your silence became a survival tactic. It kept you safe, but it also kept you stuck. There comes a moment when the silence becomes too heavy to bear. When you begin to feel restless in your spirit, when the words you've swallowed start choking your growth, when the truth you've buried begins demanding to be acknowledged, that's when it's time to reclaim your voice. Reclaiming it doesn't mean shouting. It means speaking from authenticity, from strength, from clarity. It means giving yourself permission to be fully present, fully honest, fully visible. Your voice is not just your speech. It is your boundaries, your decisions, your confidence, your intuition. When you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your ability to say yes to what aligns with you and no to what drains you. You reclaim your right to have an opinion without apologizing for it. You reclaim your authority over your own story. Your voice draws lines in the sand, declares what you will and will not tolerate, and announces that you are no longer living under the authority of past wounds. Claiming your voice also involves healing the internal dialogues that told you to stay quiet. You must confront the lies that said your thoughts didn't matter. You must dismantle the beliefs that told you to keep your feelings hidden. You must uproot the shame that convinced you to dim your light. Healing your voice is part emotional, part spiritual, part mental. It is reminding yourself daily that your soul was not designed to live in silence. You were created to contribute, to express, to articulate, to stand in your truth with boldness. When you start speaking again, really speaking from your soul, you will feel something rise within you, a sense of alignment, a sense of strength, a sense of liberation. You begin to see that reclaiming your voice is reclaiming your life. What once felt impossible becomes necessary. What once felt dangerous becomes empowering. What once felt shameful becomes sacred. And slowly, your voice grows stronger, steadier, clearer, until it fills the spaces where silence once lived. God has a way of taking what was meant to break you and transforming it into the very thing that builds you. He can take the deepest hurt of your life and turn it into honor in ways you never imagined. The pain that once made you question your worth will one day become the proof of your strength. The rejection that once left you feeling small will become the foundation of your resilience. The betrayal that tried to shatter you will become the testimony that sets you apart. Nothing you have endured is wasted when God has his hands on your story. What wounded you is not the end of you. It is the raw material God uses to elevate you. There are moments when you wonder why God allowed certain things to happen, why he didn't stop them, why he didn't intervene sooner. But God sees the whole picture when you only see a piece. He understands how every tear, every disappointment, every heartbreak can be transformed into something meaningful. What feels like a setback to you is often preparation for the honor he is shaping within you. God never lets pain be the final word. He is the God who brings beauty out of ashes, strength out of sorrow, honor out of hurt. Honor doesn't come from skipping hardship. It comes from surviving it. It comes from enduring what others thought would destroy you. It comes from rising again when everything in you wanted to stay down. It comes from holding on to faith when your circumstances seemed impossible. The pain you felt was real, but so is the promise God has spoken over your life. There is a version of you emerging from this season that could only be formed through what you endured. Sometimes honor is not given, it is forged. People may have tried to diminish you, but they do not have the authority to define you. They may have tried to shame you, but they cannot cancel what God is birthing through you. Their actions might have hurt you, but they cannot stop the honor God is preparing. When God lifts you, no betrayal can bear you. When God restores you, no rejection can reduce you. When God vindicates you, no accusation can silence you. The same people who questioned your worth will witness your elevation. The same ones who doubted your endurance will watch you walk in strength they never expected. God turns hurt into honor by transforming your perspective. What once looked like loss begins to look like learning. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like preparation. What once seemed like the end becomes the beginning of a deeper, wiser, stronger you. Honor often grows in the soil of hardship. Pain tills the ground of your soul so purpose can be planted. And when that purpose begins to bloom, honor rises with it.
The honor God gives doesn't always look like applause or recognition. Sometimes it looks like peace where you once had turmoil. Sometimes it looks like clarity where you once had confusion.
Sometimes it looks like strength where you once felt fragile. Sometimes it looks like confidence replacing insecurity. Sometimes it looks like new relationships after old ones broke you. Sometimes it looks like walking in a freedom you never thought you would feel again. That is honor. God restoring what life tried to steal. There are seasons when you will look back and realize that the very hurt you prayed for him to remove became the very reason you grew. The situation you thought would break you became the turning point that made you. The heartbreak that felt unbearable became the threshold that ushered you into your next level.
God never wastes pain.
He shapes it, redirects it, and transforms it into honor that testifies of his goodness, his power, and his unfailing ability to redeem every part of your story.